You're sitting at your desk, halfway through an email you've read 3 times and still haven't sent. The cursor blinks in the same spot it's blinked in for the last 10 minutes. Your eyes feel dry, the specific dry of a screen you've been staring at since before lunch. You blink hard, once to reset them. Somewhere behind you, a coworker laughs at something on their phone. You don't look up, and then it starts. A tiny rhythmic pulse under your left eye, like something tapping from the inside, in perfect time, refusing to stop. You press 2 fingers against it, the way everyone does as if pressure could reason with a nerve. It keeps going anyway. Nobody else can see it. You've checked in the reflection of your monitor twice already. But you can feel it over and over, and for a moment your own face doesn't feel fully under your control. This video is about why your eyelid twitches on its own, what's actually happening under the skin when it does, why it picks the moments it picks, and why your body chose this particular muscle, of all the muscles you have, to misbehave in public. By the end, you'll understand why one of the smallest muscles in your body might be the most honest messenger you own. The medical term is myokymia, a fine, involuntary, repetitive contraction of a single motor unit within the orbicularis oculi, the ring of muscle that circles your eye and closes your eyelid every time you blink, and you blink a lot. Ophthalmology researchers estimate the average adult blinks somewhere between 15 and 20 times a minute, which adds up to roughly 15,000 to 20,000 times a day. One of the highest frequency repetitive motions your entire body performs, more often than your heart changes rhythm, more often than you swallow. To keep up with that workload, the orbicularis oculi is wired differently than most muscles. Its motor neurons sit unusually close to the surface of the skin, and the muscle fibers themselves are thinner and faster twitching than the muscles in, say, your arm or your jaw. That's part of why, when something goes slightly wrong in the signal, you don't just fail to notice it the way you would with a twitch in your calf. You feel it, distinctly, right where you can't ignore it, because it's attached to the part of your face you used to see. You are not imagining it. You are feeling a nerve misfire in real time, in one of the only places on your body built, to make that misfire impossible to miss. But here's where it gets interesting. The eyelid twitches almost always, traced back to irritation of the facial nerve, cranial, nerve 7, and the single biggest trigger researchers keep coming back to, across nearly every study on the subject, is sleep deprivation. Here's the mechanism. Every motor neuron in your body has a firing threshold, a level of stimulation it needs before it sends a signal to contract a muscle. When you're well rested, that threshold sits comfortably high, which means small, random background noise in your nervous system doesn't accidentally cross it. A study published in the journal Sleep Medicine found that even a single night of reduced sleep is enough to measurably lower that threshold, and sleep-deprived participants in the study showed significantly more spontaneous muscle spasms across the face compared to participants who'd slept a full night. In practical terms, that means the same background electrical noise that's always present in your nervous system, the noise your brain normally filters out, without you ever knowing, suddenly has an easier time slipping through and reaching the muscle. Your eyelid doesn't misfire because something new went wrong. It misfires because the volume on ordinary noise got turned up, and this particular muscle happens to be sensitive enough to react to it. Your eyelid, in other words, is often the first part of you to admit you're exhausted, before your brain will admit it, before your focus visibly drops, before you'd ever think to check the clock and count how many hours of sleep you actually got last night. But here's where it gets interesting. Caffeine is the second most common trigger clinicians ask about, and the interesting part isn't that caffeine causes twitching, it's that it's almost never the first cup that does it. Clinical reviews on eyelid myokymia consistently identify a threshold, not a trigger. Caffeine intake above roughly 200 to 300 milligrams a day, the equivalent of 2 to 3 standard cups of coffee, is the point where twitching becomes noticeably more frequent in the general population. Below that line, most people report no connection at all. Above it, the connection becomes common enough that it's one of the first questions doctors ask when someone comes in, complaining of a twitch that won't quit. The reason comes down to how caffeine works at the cellular level. It's an adenosine receptor antagonist, which is a complicated way of saying it blocks the chemical your brain normally uses to slow nerve activity down. That's exactly why it keeps you awake. But it doesn't only act on the neurons that manage alertness. It raises excitability in motor neurons throughout your nervous system, including, again, the unusually sensitive ones running your eyelid. So your third cup of coffee isn't just circulating through your bloodstream, keeping your eyes open and your focus sharp. It's sitting in your eyelid too, lowering the exact same threshold that a bad night's sleep lowers, except this time you did it to yourself voluntarily. One refill at a time. But here's where it gets interesting. Stress works differently than fatigue or caffeine. It doesn't just tire the nerve or raise its background noise. It changes your body's chemistry in a way that primes the nerve to misfire more easily for longer. Research in the field of psychoneuroimmunology has shown that cortisol, the hormone your adrenal glands release under stress, increases neuromuscular excitability throughout the body, meaning nerves become measurably more likely to fire when they shouldn't, not just in the moment of stress but for a stretch of time afterward, while cortisol is still clearing from your system. Movement disorder specialists who study myokymia have observed this pattern clinically and repeatedly. Patients report a spike in eyelid twitching during high-stress weeks, final exams, hiring decisions, family conflict, deadlines stacked on deadlines, and then a near-total disappearance of the symptom once the stressor passes and life returns to something resembling normal. Not a gradual fade, often a fairly sharp drop-off, timed almost exactly to when the pressure lifts. Your eyelid isn't reacting to your life in some poetic, metaphorical sense. It's reacting to a specific, measurable hormone, released in a specific, measurable amount, in direct response to whatever is currently stressing you out. But here's where it gets interesting. There's a fourth trigger, quieter than the other three, that almost nobody mentions when they talk about eye twitches, and it has nothing to do with sleep, caffeine, or stress at all. Ophthalmology researchers have found that people blink up to 60% less often while looking at a screen compared to when they're doing anything else. Reading a physical book, having a conversation, walking outside. Your blink rate essentially collapses the moment a screen enters your field of view, because focused visual attention suppresses the blink reflex. That drop in blinking dries out the surface of the eye faster than your tear film can keep up with, and a dry ocular surface irritates the same nerve endings responsible for myokymia. So the twitch some people chalk up to generic eye strain often isn't strain in the way we usually mean it. It's closer to a lubrication problem. Your nervous system firing extra signals to a muscle that's trying and failing to keep the eye's surface properly coated. The fix clinicians usually recommend isn't rest, exactly. It's not walking away from the screen for an hour. It's blinking on purpose, full, deliberate blinks roughly every 20 minutes, to manually do what your suppressed blink reflex has stopped doing on its own. But here's where it gets interesting. If you've spent any time searching your own symptoms, you've probably run into one more explanation: magnesium deficiency. It's one of the most repeated claims online. Low magnesium causes muscle twitching, so take a supplement and the eyelid will stop. The honest answer here is more complicated than most articles let on. Magnesium genuinely does play a role in regulating neuromuscular excitability. It's not a myth invented out of nowhere, and severe magnesium deficiency is a documented cause of muscle spasms throughout the body. But clinical researchers who've actually studied eyelid myokymia specifically have not found strong, consistent evidence that mild, everyday magnesium levels the kind most twitch sufferers actually have, are meaningfully linked to this particular symptom. Some small studies show a modest connection. Others show none at all. That's worth admitting plainly, because it's tempting to want one tidy explanation, one supplement, one fix. The research doesn't fully support that tidiness. What the research does support, consistently and repeatedly across dozens of studies, is sleep, caffeine, stress, and screen-related dryness. Magnesium sits in a much shakier, much less certain category. Plausible, occasionally relevant, but not the reliable explanation the internet often makes it out to be. But here's where it gets interesting. Here's the part that changes how you should think about everything so far. In the overwhelming majority of cases, myokymia is completely benign. It's not a warning sign. It's not a symptom of anything serious happening inside your body. It's your nervous system doing exactly what it's built to do when it's mildly overloaded from a combination of the factors above. It just happens to be one of the only overload signals you can actually watch happen in real time, on your own face, instead of it staying invisible the way most nervous system noise does. But there's a rare exception, and it's worth knowing the difference clearly. In extremely uncommon cases, twitching that spreads beyond the eyelid itself, into the cheek, or across one entire side of the face, can be a sign of a neurological condition called hemifacial spasm, which involves a blood vessel pressing against the facial nerve at its root. Neurologists are consistent on this point. The vast majority of eyelid twitches never come anywhere close to that territory, and an isolated, occasional eyelid twitch is not something to spiral about. Still, it's the one place in this topic where it'll pass on its own isn't universally true, and doctors do recommend getting persistent, spreading, or unusually prolonged twitching checked rather than assumed away indefinitely. For almost everyone watching this, though, the twitch isn't a malfunction to fear. It's a message, delivered in a language you didn't know you were fluent in. Sleep less, drink more caffeine, carry more stress, stare at more screens, and your eyelid tells on you before you're willing to admit any of it to yourself. It doesn't wait for you to notice you're exhausted. It doesn't wait for you to admit the week has been too much. It just starts tapping, quietly, insistently, until you either fix the cause or learn to live with the reminder. You're back at your desk. The email is still unsent. The cursor is still blinking in the same spot. And your eye is still twitching too, tapping out its small, stubborn rhythm under your skin, exactly like it was at the start of all this. Except now you know what it's actually saying. It's not random. It's not broken. It's not a warning you need to fear. It's the most honest part of your face. The one part of you too tired, too caffeinated, too stressed, or too screen-lit to keep pretending you're fine. Some parts of the body whisper. This one just won't stop tapping until you finally listen.